With us now here on the Hill, Senator Dave McCormick, Republican from Pennsylvania, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The senator also attended West Point, served as a captain in the 82nd Airborne Division. Senator, first time on the show. I thank you for your time. Thanks for being with us tonight. You just heard Robert there abroad. Iran bringing the rhetoric up. We know the president's talking about an armada. Do you think the most likely scenario here is some sort of a deal or some sort of strikes from the U.S. military?
Well, I think what we should be focused on here is we're at a moment of unique transformation in the Middle East. And Iran has been the supporter of state-sponsored terror, has suppressed its people, have killed thousands of people over the last month or so. And they're at an all-time point of weakness. The regime is bankrupt. Economically, 80% of the people are in poverty. Its military capabilities greatly diminished by the attacks by Israel and the United States. And the Ayatollah is 86 years old. There needs to be a change. And I think the United States is putting enormous pressure. President Trump's putting enormous pressure. And I think we'll see a change. I don't know if it's days or weeks or months, but I think we're at a moment that uprising in the streets cannot be minimized.
How does that change come, Senator? Does it involve, in your view, U.S. military action?
Well, you know, the president's, I don't presume what he is thinking he might do, but recognize there's an enormous amount we can do with military capabilities that would go far beyond the idea of putting troops on the ground. So we have all sorts of sophisticated technological capabilities to put pressure on the Iranian regime. Economic, with the sanctions we're doing. We have enormous intel assets. We've shown the capabilities we can bring to bear in the case of Venezuela. So I think there's lots of ways to put pressure on here, and I think the president is putting himself in a position where he has a wide range of options. So I wouldn't presume how or when, but I do think he's able to apply a lot of pressure, and I do think that pressure is appropriate.
Senator, I gave some of your background. In a former life, you were running one of the biggest financial companies, financial firms in the United States. I'm looking at right now crude oil prices rising close to 10% in the last handful of days. There's the chart there on our screen for our new audience here on NewsNation or those listening to us on Sirius XM. If there is some sort of action, do you have any worries, Senator, or what do you think would come next as it relates to oil prices and what that would mean for Americans at the pump?
Well, obviously, geopolitical uncertainty often has a big effect on markets, and I think that's what we're seeing here. As your reporter said, the Straits of Hormuz have enormous amount of oil that flows through them.
Like 27%, I believe. So it's a huge part of. Yeah, it's a huge part of the oil flow.
Exactly, but I think stepping back, I wouldn't focus so much on the day-to-day price action. I'd focus on the question of, are the steps that the president's taking putting America and the world in a position for energy dominance? And I think the move in that took place in Venezuela, that's 17% of the oil reserves there that can be unlocked. They only export about 1%. What's happening in the Middle East, this will ultimately make for a safer, more stable Middle East with a new regime in Iran, which will be great for energy prices because the supplies across the Middle East won't be at risk. So we may have some near-term disruption and near-term price action. I wouldn't want to predict that. But the trend here is to create open markets and the opportunity to develop those energy capabilities in Iran, Venezuela, and around the world.
I'm looking at thehill.com right now, Senator. Main headline, Senate strikes deal to avert partial shutdown. Are you going to vote for it when it hits the Senate floor?
Well, you're one step ahead of me, so I'm not sure what the outline of that deal is. I know there's been good faith negotiation.
I'm breaking a little news to you here, Senator.
I mean, yes, sir. I mean, listen, I would never. I don't want to vote for shutting down the government. I think that's a bad vote. I think what the Democrats are doing is theater, political theater. The actions to stop the funding for DHS won't affect ICE at all because it's already funded through the Working Families Tax Cut Act. So the only thing it's going to do if we shut down the government or shut down the DHS appropriations bill is to put pressure on FEMA and the Secret Service and the Coast Guard at a time when we're facing, really historical storms in much of America. So I don't think this is good policy. I think it's bad behavior on the part of the Democrats. However, I do know that cooler minds are prevailing here, and they're trying to find a path through this. And I'm certainly supportive of anything that's not going to shut the government down.
All right, Senator Dave McCormick, hope you come on back.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.